No, the only thing that was kind of hovering around is the Colorado game, and it's scattered thunderstorms, which is seemingly the forecast every night around there. So there's nothing that caught me that I was too concerned about.
Yeah, but I'm looking at that now. It looks like you said, it looks like a lot of that's getting pushed back, the scattered thunderstorms. But I always want to keep an eye on that sort of thing, especially if you're obviously not looking for a pitcher in the Colorado game. But the big thing is if you're recommending or looking to start a pitcher in a potential weather game, you really got to keep an eye on that sort of thing. But
the Reds and Cubs looks like there's like some small, non-negligible chance of rain, and I think Bailey and Arrieta are both probably options for people. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yep, good catch there. And it looks like potentially for the first 2 hours. Another thing to look out for with weather, it's not necessarily bad if you pick a pitcher in a game that starts delayed, because then they kind of get to their normal routine still. But if you pick a pitcher that the game gets delayed after 2 or 3 innings in, then you really have to worry. So if you're showing weather and potential rain in the first hour or two, that's something you don't necessarily have to worry about as long as it looks clear afterwards. But keep an eye on that game. And I guess we'll just segue from that into pitchers. You mentioned, Derek, that you think Bailey and Arrieta are both options. Who do you like better of the two?
Of the two, I think I like. It's tough. It's because they're up against each other, so it cuts into each other's chances of getting the win. But I think I go with Bailey, especially in cash games, just because he is a little bit safer. The floor is a little bit higher. But I really like Arrieta. I mean, I've talked about him for a few weeks now, but I love his stuff, and I love that he's finally translating it into numbers.
What's your stance on that, Drew? Do you kind of think Bailey's the safer player, or do you go Arrieta?
Yeah, I have Bailey pretty substantially ahead of Arrieta, and it's just strength of the opponent is, Cincinnati is a much better offense now with Joey Votto back, and, a more proven track record with Bailey. He's done it a little bit longer. Arrieta's success, he's always had great stuff. He was a former top prospect. The Cubs bought real low on him, and his success has really been spurred on by him finding this cutter that's allowed him to get lefties out, which he couldn't get lefties out for the first few years of his career. As a starter, he was kind of shaping up to be like a Bud Norris type, and then he's figured out a way to get lefties out, so he's a different pitcher. So I do have Bailey ahead of him in substantially. So their price points are like the same around the industry, and I lean on Bailey's track record and the strength of the opponent being a bit weaker.
Yeah, I like Bailey, but I do think it's closer than I think Dink does. I really like Arrieta.
So you say, Dink, that you like Bailey substantially more. Where does he rank for you overall?
I have him as our 5th best pitcher today.
Okay, and who do you have ahead of him?
I have Kershaw, Kazmir, Hudson, and C.J. Wilson ahead of him.
Okay, let's talk about Kershaw a little bit, because I know his price is obviously pretty high throughout the industry. You look at the matchup and you think there's not a ton of upside with the Royals, who don't K a lot. Do you still like him tonight, Cardi?
I'm definitely off Kershaw tonight. I'm all about the Kershaw fade. I don't think it's a bad matchup, but it's not one that I'm going to pay up for him for. I mean, the Royals don't K a lot. I think their offense is better than a lot of people give it credit for. He's going into the American League where he's going to have to face a DH, which he usually doesn't have to do. The Royals are going to be able to get the platoon advantage against him with most of their lineup. It looks like 7 of their 9 guys. So I don't think it's an ideal matchup for Kershaw, where you're going to have to pay so much to get him.
Yeah, and it's important to point out that the Royals actually are using a DH and not a pitcher that plays third base named Moustakas. So that's a good start in the right direction for them.
That's true. And Derek brought up the point, Kershaw traveling over to an AL ballpark, so you have to play you don't get to face the pitcher spot. You got the opposite going in Kazmir's favor. Where do you? I think you said second, Drew. Does that give him a big boost in your projections, or how do you rate Kazmir?
Yeah, it's a meaningful boost, and I mean the Mets strike out a lot against left-handed pitching, and they really only have one bat that really scares you against lefties, which is David Wright. The rest, they've got some okay platoon guys like a Chris Young, but nobody that's really an elite hitter against left-handed pitching other than Wright. So it's a good matchup. You move from the AL to the NL. That drops, the ERA somewhere around a half run. So it's a good spot. I'm probably more likely to play Kazmir than Kershaw just because of the big price gap between the two. Usually I'm the guy who's always saying, whenever Kershaw's going, you kind of want to play him or pay up for whatever the top pitcher is. But I think the price gap between the first and second ranked pitchers for us is enough that you can consider going in other directions today.
Yeah, I think I like Kazmir better than Kershaw overall today even, so when you consider the price gap, it's not even a question for me. I mean, like Dink was saying, Wright is about the only, threat in that lineup. The Mets did get very right-handed today. Murphy and Granderson are the only lefties in there, but just the overall quality is just so low. I don't think there's a whole lot to worry about.
Bartolo's been raking lately, though, so you have to worry about him in the ninth hole.
I noticed they didn't bat him eighth. They didn't mess around with that. They've been hitting their pitchers eighth, but not Bartolo.
He needs more RBI opportunities. I think he'll get that out of the 9 hole than the 8th spot. So the next guy in line I know for Derek is C.J. Wilson. Can you talk a little bit about him, Derek?
Yeah, C.J. Wilson I'm not as confident on as I am about Kazmir because I think pitching kind of gets a little shaky after Kazmir today. But Minnesota, they're not as good as they look on paper, and they're not as good as I thought they were going to be a couple weeks ago when they signed Kendrys Morales and Arcia and Willingham were coming off the DL. I mean, there's just a lot of question marks in that lineup. Kendrys has been really terrible. He doesn't look like he's necessarily, ready to face big league pitching yet. Danny Santana is, I don't believe, real. Arcia has been really struggling, maybe to do with his wrist injury. And you look at just some of the other hitters in the lineup, once you get past the main guys that I thought were going to be able to carry it and aren't. I mean, the bottom third of that order is just disgusting.
Yeah, and then, Dink, we got a question in chat here. Thoughts on Duffy tonight? And Cannon mentions that he thinks the Dodgers lineup is horrible. So your thoughts on Duffy?
Yeah, the Dodgers lineup is weak with no Hanley, and I mean D's not a huge loss against left-handed pitching, but considering what they're replacing him with, it's a meaningful loss and certainly a disruption on the base pass if he gets there. But just in general, Duffy's been pretty meh against right-handed bats, and his strikeout rates are pretty low against right-handed bats. So I mean, it's possible he tosses a nice BABIP-induced game, but I don't think it'll be a huge fantasy game, even if he pitches well, just because I don't think he's going to strike out a lot of guys.
Yeah, and I agree there. I think, we talk about on the show a lot the platoon advantage, and I think when you're facing, obviously some of the guys have lower skill sets, like you got Justin Turner leading off that doesn't have great skill set, but the fact that he has the platoon advantage over Duffy, who you mentioned struggles a bit with righties in general and striking him out, I think that means a lot in an instance or a case where you're dealing with the guy that has skill sets like Danny Duffy. So I think even though the lineup looks a little weak, the fact that they are, pretty much completely righty stacked is going to be tough for Duffy to get strikeouts and have much of an upside. I'm trying to think. Did we miss anyone else? Is there anyone else you guys wanted to touch on as far as starting pitching goes?
I like
Chris. No, go ahead, Drew.
I like Andrew Heaney a lot. I really like his skill set. He dominated left-handed bats in the minors. The Phillies have 3 of their middle of the order bats being left-handed today, with Utley, Howard, and Ashe hitting 6th. I think that's a nice relief spot, getting Ashe hitting 6th instead of Mayberry, and I think that's pretty meaningful in this matchup for him. And I like the fact that they won't have seen him, that it'll be the first time trying to adjust to him. And like I said, he just utterly dominated. He had like a 29% K rate against left-handed bats in AAA this year, in AAA and AA. Obviously, it's a big jump going to the big leagues, and the park's tough. But I think he's underpriced around the industry. I think he's a good option for multiple starting pitcher sites. And if you're going tournaments, I think I'd rather go Heaney than a Danny Duffy, or I'd rather go like a Heaney or a Masterson than a Danny Duffy.
I agree with that. I would much rather go Heaney than Danny Duffy. The other guy I wanted to mention is Chris Archer. He's my system puts him as a top 5 guy today, and I think it makes perfect sense. Pittsburgh isn't very good. They don't have a lot of lefties to get to him. I mean, adding Polanco recently, he is a lefty, and that kind of hurts a little bit. But I still think, at home in a good park with a good catcher with a platoon advantage against most of the guys, they're probably going to have Travis Snyder again in the DH spot.
They've got Neil Walker back. That's one.
Neil Walker's back. Yeah, even still, I still think Archer is a good play today.
Yeah, I really wrestled with. So I had Kershaw, Kazmir, Hudson, and then I wrestled with like Bailey, C.J. Wilson, and Archer were all very, very similar to me. And I ended up putting C.J. ahead because I thought he was a little bit, in terms of the combination of safety and upside, he was probably the strongest. And then I thought Bailey was next and Archer, but they were all right there for me, so I think they're all strong plays.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned Hudson in your rankings. Can you give a little insight on why you like him other than just the fact that he's going against the Padres?
Yeah,
or is that basically it?
Padres stink. Some of the umpire data I've looked at is favorable on Honora, and so there might be a little bit of a wider strike zone that he's accustomed to. And I mean, just in general, the Padres are terrible, and it's in the best pitchers park in the NL, in my opinion. So,
your thoughts on Hudson tonight, Derek? I don't think you wrote him up.
I didn't write him up. I don't dislike Hudson tonight. I think he's a pretty good play. I think there's a lot of kind of guys in that area that are appealing tonight. I don't have a problem if you want to play Hudson.
And I think GPP options, Drew, you mentioned like Heaney's probably your top lower price GPP guy. Do you have a guy like that, Cardi? I think you touched on Buchanan.
I did. I touched on Buchanan.
and now you're regretting it.
I regret it just because he's not that good of a pitcher, but the matchup is pretty good. And he's not terrible. Like, he's not as bad as that ERA indicates. Like, I looked at some video of his stuff, and it's not bad. I mean, his changeup's pretty good. His curve doesn't have, that tight spin you really want to see on it, but he gets, good fade on the changeup. He gets good velocity separation on it. He's got a fastball and a sinker to kind of work to either hand guy. So against the Marlins, who are very right-handed, I don't know. I think he's a decent, GPP option tonight for cheap.
He's been crushed by righties in the minors the last 2 years, which had me a little bit concerned about his outcomes today. He gave up like an 850 OPS in AA to right-handers 2 years ago, and he was getting knocked around by righties against it. It was weird. I mean, it's not a big enough sample that I draw strict conclusions from it, but the really low K rate, just I don't see a lot of upside there. He had a really low K rate in the minors, so he's a guy I'm actually tactically taking advantage of. I'm trying to get hitters against him.
Okay. So then I assume that they're similarly priced, Heaney and Buchanan. I assume Heaney pretty much hands down where they're similarly priced. And Draft Street, it looks like there's about a $2,700 difference between the two. Do you still think Drew Heaney's just a hands down better play even at that $2,700 separation?
Yeah, in my opinion. And then if you wanted to like split the difference, I have to see what lineup Gibson threw out there, but I was kind of assuming he'd throw out a terrible lineup because he usually does. I was thinking Masterson might be a good GPP play if they give him a bunch of righties to face. It looks like they've actually put out a good lineup with a bunch of lefties, so I will probably strike that from the record now.
They're starting to get, because I wrote up, I ranked Bumgarner on Sunday a little lower than I should have, and it seems like with a lot of their new bats coming up, they're getting a lot more left-handed than they originally were. And so even everyday players, they're going to get, they're tending to run out more lefties than righties. So it's almost switching over the past year, where in the past you kind of wanted to target them with right-handed pitching, but it's almost getting to the point where you're going to start wanting to target them with left-handed pitching.
Yeah. The other guy I'd throw out there, just because when he has pitched well, it's been really good, and when he's been bad, it's been really bad, is Aaron Harang. It's a negative park shift, and it's playing against a DH, but the Astros, when they're bad, they're really bad, and they strike out a lot. So if you're going tournaments, I would consider Harang in play as well. So
I think here's where I channel my inner Davis Maddock and say, nah, man. The Astros, they're the Astros. They're so good now. You can't take any pitcher at all against the Astros because they're too good. So you can't ride Harang today.
What does Mr. Tuttle think, though? That's what I really care about.
I think it is. I'd avoid Harang, but I don't think. I guess I would be somewhere in the middle of this too. I mean, it sounds like it's obviously a GPP option. We'll leave it at that. Wow. It's nothing where you're going to want to put any significant amount of money on it, but it's an option that could provide some upside potentially.
So Ben was saying in chat that he normally basically anybody but Harang is kind of what he said last night when he was going to be ranking pitchers. He said I'll pick on Houston's righties with anybody except I'm not going near Harang. So it's interesting to hear Dink's declaration of love for Harang tonight.
That might be going a little far, but yeah, I mean, when he's right, he's been he's almost nothing in between. It's almost a horrific start or an unbelievable start.
So he might be someone that Derek is tactically targeting for his batters then tonight.
Yeah, I'm sort of closer to the Davis side of the fence with Harang tonight. I'm not about him against Houston.
So we'll move on to batters then. Do either of you like any Astros bats, or I guess any bats in general from that game? I know Ben wrote up Gaddis. I think that was partial fandom. But overall, Derek, do you like any bats from this game, and who would you play?
I think there's definitely some options from that game. I mean, I think in Houston's lineup, Castro's batting lower than you want him to, and I think there's some other catcher options tonight. But I don't think him against Harang is bad. Singleton, where he's still, relatively cheap, I think is fine. On the Atlanta side, I think Freeman, Hayward, LaStella, they're all good. They're getting a little bit of a park shift, platoon advantage against a pitcher that's not very good. So I'm cool with any of those guys tonight.
Yeah, I think the Braves side would be an interesting, maybe possibly overlooked stack that you could ride out there. It seems weird once again that Freddie's riding out. He has an obsession for BJ over Justin for some reason. Justin's down to batting 6th in the order for some odd reason, while BJ Upton's now leading off.
Put Hayward in the leadoff spot and then bump Justin up in one of the 3, 4, 5 spots. It
yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. I mean, I don't mind LaStella batting, top 1 or 2. That's fine. But it seems like the Uptons need to switch the third of the batting order that they're in. But I wouldn't mind them as a kind of a mini stack or stack that might be a little under the radar. Do you have what's your favorite stack of the night, Drew?
I mean, it's going to be the Cardinals. It's always going to be Coors Field for me. The Cardinals and the Rockies, and so that's the tough thing for me is that I don't mind Atlanta and I don't mind Houston when we're talking about their bats, but none of their guys individually stood out as great prices to me. And so they were always tertiary plays. They were the third in my list, and so they didn't even really get mentioned in our content today. Singleton looks all right, Castro looks all right, Fowler looks all right. The price points on all those guys are okay, not great. Hayward's a little bit elevated, but he looks fine. And then there's tournament sides with Gaddis and stuff like that. So I agree with you, Tuttle. I think there's some sneaky tournament stacks potentially in that game. But none of those guys were making it when I was building lineups for myself tonight.
Okay. So, yeah, you like the Cardinals side. Cardi, you kind of mentioned briefly yesterday that you weren't a fan of stacking the Rockies or getting too much exposure for the Rockies going up against the Lynn. Do you have similar feelings tonight against Miller, or is it full stack away for the Rockies tonight?
No, I like Lynn better than I like Miller. So, I mean, it's so boring just to be stack Cardinals and stack Rockies. But, I mean, I think it's definitely viable tonight. I think definitely go Cardinals before Rockies, for sure. But if you want to stack some Rockies, go for it. I think an under-the-radar stack that I'm looking at is Washington. They're getting a big park shift going to Miller Park. Gallardo hasn't been particularly, good this year. I mean, he's slightly above average pitcher maybe at this point. So I think Nationals look kind of good.
Do you have a under-the-radar stack, Drew?
I mean, I don't know if they're under the radar or not, but Detroit's getting a huge park shift. They have no platoon advantage anywhere against Colby Lewis, but Colby has stopped being dominant against righties. He was always dominant against righties, and now this year the peripherals are kind of weak against righties. So I could see their offense going off, but it's tough to pay for it. So that's kind of why it's under the radar, because I don't think anyone's going to really want to pay up for Miggy and Victor and Kinsler. But I think after St. Louis and Colorado, that's the team I have the most confidence in lighting up the scoreboard tonight.
Another one I'll mention real quick, and then we'll move on to positions. And the second guy I'll mention kind of will lead us there. But I think the Blue Jays, maybe not for a full-on stack, But if you're playing in the DraftKings Punch-Out, I think they have some nice price points on some of their key guys in the lineup. You know, with Batista out, Rasmus gets a nice bump into the 5-hole. He's still 3,600 on DraftKings tonight, and I think he's a good filler outfield position. And then I think who one of the top first basemen is today would be on DraftKings for his price point would be Adam Lind, who's sitting at 3,700. I think that's a really good price that you want to take advantage of, especially on DraftKings. Who's your top first baseman of the day, Cardi?
It's going to be, overall, it's going to be Miguel Cabrera. Like Dink said, he's getting the big park shift. Lewis, unfortunately, really hasn't been that good. So Cabrera's the guy today. And then after that, it's kind of like, I don't know, take your pick of like the next, obvious guys, Encarnacion, Freddie Freeman, Brandon Moss. I think in terms of value, I think Adam Dunn is a good play today. I think Lind is a good play today. Adam LaRoche, I think, is a good value play today.
How about you, Drew?
Yeah, the guy. So I had Cabrera ahead, and then like Cardi said, there's a big group that I'm splitting hairs on pricing with Jose Abreu, Brandon Moss, Justin Morneau, and then there's a drop off where there's some value and drop off on pricing with Lind and Teixeira, who hits from the right side really well and gets a nice park shift for right-handed power. I'm ending up on Lind a lot. And where I'm not paying up for a first baseman is kind of where I'm ending up because he's cheap and he's hitting third today, I think. So it's a really good spot for him.
Yeah, I don't think like last night you don't have the obvious Coors option. Morneau is a great option, obviously, but he's priced like that. Do either of you like the idea of paying up for Morneau tonight, or do you think that's somewhere where you want to pass and just take one of the other options?
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to to pay up for Morneau, rather. Of that group of those next kind of guys that we were talking about, I think Lind is probably up there for me. But I think Adam Dunn, especially in GPPs where you can afford kind of the variance in his line, is probably my favorite of that kind of mid-tier group tonight against Miguel Gonzalez in a good park with the platoon advantage.
How about you, Drew? Do you think it's best to save money on first base or go elsewhere, or do you want to spend the high price tag on Morneau?
It's really a cop-out answer, but it's pretty site dependent. On DraftKings, Lind is so much cheaper than that whole group that he really stands out. On Draft Street, Lind and Votto are in the same price point in the 6s. Then there's some decent guys in the 7s and 8s. And then Morneau is right next to Mickey, and I'm not going to pay for Morneau unless I'm mini stacking the Rockies when I can get Miggy for just a few hundred more. So it sort of depends on the site, but I think if he's bunched around the group of Brandon Moss and Ortiz, even though he rates a little bit lower in my model, I might reach up for getting the Coors exposure just because outside of him and probably Dickerson and maybe Blackman, there's not a lot of exposure on the Rockies side that I'm going to have tonight. And I would like some. So that might be a tiebreaker for me, just getting some more exposure to their lineup.
Okay. And then we got a question, and this is actually one of my favorite under-the-radar guys, Steve Pearce, on Draft Street. Draft Street specifically, looks like he's about 5K there. What's your thought on Steve Pearce, Cardi?
Let me look at the matchup tonight. I know I liked Pearce quite a bit last night. Tonight, I'm sure I'm going to like him tonight too. Batting second, platoon advantage at home against Quintana, yeah. Especially for that cheap, I like him.
Looks like our lineups page says the wind is blowing out to left field, so take that for what it's worth. It might not be worth a whole lot, but it does look like the wind's blowing out a little bit, at least to left field, so you could get some more righty power out there in Baltimore. And Camden Yards is just a good place to hit in general. So yeah, I don't mind Pearce personally at all for that price on Draft Street. I think if it certainly is a site dependent play though. I think on DraftKings where you can get Lind for it looks like $100 more, you're probably going to want to just play it a little safer and just stick with Lind. Would be my opinion on it. Your thoughts on that, Dink? Pearce based on site, otherwise just go with the other options. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't mind Pearce. And the other guy, I haven't seen a line for Cleveland come out yet, but that might be in that area as well, is Swisher. depending on where he's hitting in the lineup. He's like 4 or something on Draft Street. And he's always hit left-handed pitching much better than right-handed pitching in his career. Miley's pretty good, and he keeps the ball on the ground, but it is a nice park boost for them. And again, depending on where he hits in the lineup, I think he would be under consideration as well. Because I think Quintana's a better pitcher than Miley, and I think Swisher's a better hitter than Pierce. So.
All right, moving on to catcher. I want to take my value play of the day before any of you get to him, and it will lead us into some Bartolo talk. Stephen Vogt, batting 5th against Bartolo Colon, 2,800 on DraftKings. Your thoughts on that, Dink?
I mean, he's not the guy that I'm landing on, but I do think that price tag on DraftKings or anywhere that he's catcher eligible is interesting because he is hitting 5th. It's a good lineup spot. It's a good lineup overall. And as I've said before, I believe Cologne has some pretty big splits with left-handed bats. So I think it's fine. And at that price point, 2,800 is really compelling. I'm landing on Sulfalamakia a lot. I just think it's a better park. I think he's facing a worse pitcher overall, and I think he's a better hitter than Vogt.
Whoa! At least we got you to admit Buchanan's a better or a worse pitcher than Cologne. I think Cardi will take that.
Yeah, I don't think Cologne's a bad pitcher. I just think he's very susceptible to left-hand power. I've always thought Cologne's a good pitcher, and if he gets a righty-heavy lineup, he dominates. But against a lineup that's going to stack lefties against him, that's where it gets tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like Cologne tonight. I know me and Dink definitely disagree about how to treat his platoon splits and everything. But I think Vogt, where he's really cheap, I think he's a solid play tonight.
And do you agree with Sulfalamakia? Who are your other catching options then, Derek?
Well, I mean, there's the top obvious guys. There's Evan Gattis. There's Willen Rosario. There's Jonathan Lucroy. And then after that, I think Salty is going to be in the conversation. I think Dioner Navarro is going to be in the conversation at home against David Phelps. Those are kind of the guys I'd be looking at. Maybe Miguel Montero against Masterson at home.
Okay. Do you on the site, like, I don't know if you're playing Draft Street tonight, Dink, but on Draft Street it seems like they just never price up Rosario. Do you find yourself taking a guy like that quite a bit just to get that Coors exposure for cheap in a good bat, or do you tend to stay away from that?
I tend to stay when he's priced down. It's against right-handed pitching, and so for his career at home against righties, he's got a 323 weighted on base average. So he's like okay against righties.
Career at home against righties? Are we really going to slice it up that much?
What would you like? How would you like me to do it? Career overall against righties, he's much worse. I'm trying to incorporate the Coors boost into it. He's 305 weighted on base average career versus righties, and that's with a neutral BABIP and neutral batted ball data. So he's not a good hitter against right-handed pitching. Now, when he's priced for that, and the pitcher he's going against isn't exactly dominant against righties, I'm okay doing it. But on most nights, I'm not the one playing for it. If you get an at-bat against a left-handed reliever, it is huge because he is so ridiculously good against lefties. But in general, it's not a play that I use. I know a lot of the other really good players on Draft Street do it a lot, though. So I won't argue it.
And yeah, I tend to. It's really hard. I think you probably are in the. You have the logic behind it. I think it's probably the right move, but it's so tempting when you see his price tag on Draft Street against righties. It's always around that mid 4 to 5 to low 5 range. It's really hard to pass up that cheap exposure at Coors.
Yeah, I think I'm all over that. I have him ranked really high today, so for that price tag, I think he's the way to go.
Speaking of cheap exposure at Coors, a guy that finally cracked Walt Weiss's lineup after Derek and I have tried to will him into the lineup. We finally get Ryan Wheeler batting right behind Rosario. It looks like he's 4,300 on Draft Street. He's pretty much going to be dirt cheap everywhere. Do you like him as an option at third base tonight, Derek?
Absolutely. My system has him as a top 10 guy, so he's not even like a value guy that you're just playing because he's cheap. He's like a legitimately pretty good play tonight. Obviously, there's going to be better guys just who have better skills in general. but I think he's definitely a guy you have to consider with how cheap he is and how good the matchup is.
Can you give us a little scouting report on it before we get into the top 10 argument?
I actually saw Wheeler in person during scout school. He was like, there's like a few guys now that I saw that are like in the majors, and they're like Wheeler, like Ryan Flaherty types mostly. But I mean, he's got a little bit of pop. He's his swing's a little long, but he's got some pop. He's in a good park for it, and you know, he's got a great matchup.
Okay, and then now Drew, you can get on with the top 10 talk.
No, I was just clarifying. You mean top 10 third baseman, not like top 10.
Oh yeah, third baseman, not overall.
Okay.
That's I had the same initial reaction, and I figured it had to have meant third base too.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, like third base isn't a particularly compelling situation in general today, so I don't mind that. Like, we were talking on Draft Street before. He's within. Like, Adrian Beltre is so cheap on Draft Street that I'm not going to opt for Wheeler for $2K less than Adrian Beltre. But on other sites, I'm where Beltre is priced more appropriately. I'm definitely on board with Wheeler as an option at third.
Okay. Do you know, is he just that much of a defensive downgrade that Weiss hasn't been putting him in the lineup, or do you know why he hasn't been cracked in the lineup at all, Dink?
I have no idea. Culberson is terrible. He's not a particularly good defender either, so I have no clue. I mean, Wheeler to me looks like a guy, you know, who is hit all right in the minor leagues. But again, I haven't scouted him or anything, so I don't know. He looks okay. He doesn't look like anything more than, you know, a replacement level hitter, which in Coors is very valuable at a cheap price. But
especially against righties, like I don't see why Culberson would be like playing against him against righties, although very small samples. But if you look at his UZR as a third baseman, it's like tiny samples, but it's like negative 150.
Yeah, isn't he a first baseman by trade? Like,
yeah, he was when I looked at him. So
that is probably it. Although Culberson has not been very smooth at third base himself.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That's another boost to the Cardinals' righties, because De La Rosa generates a lot of ground balls to that left side. Mm-hmm. So,
and
that's true.
Arenado is not there to steal all the like line drives that are supposed to be triples and doubles.
Exactly. Yes, that's a really good point that Drew just brought up. You're going to get a lot of ground balls to the left side of the diamond, and if you have a below average defender there, that could certainly boost up some of the Cardinals' righties. Is there any other third baseman that you guys want to touch on?
I think Connor Gillespie is a good value third baseman tonight. Not even a good value. I think a good third baseman in general tonight. He's got a huge true platoon split. He's not playing in the Rogers Center, but Camden Yards is still a very good park for lefties, especially for lefty power. Miguel Gonzalez isn't a good pitcher. He gives up fly balls, so I think Gillespie's a good play.
He's a pretty good price on DraftKings. It looks like he's 3,800. A guy I would like if he was batting up a little higher in the order would be Juan Francisco, but can't seem to crack that mid tier yet or anymore. So I don't think he's as viable of an option tonight. Moving on, shortstop. Is it just Peralta for you, Dink, and then filling in the other positions from there?
It helps that Peralta's hitting 5th instead of like 7th where he was hitting last night, so that definitely helps. I know when I was making some lineups on some sites where Reyes is close in price, I was mixing in some Reyes. But yeah, I think Peralta and Reyes are probably going to be the two guys that you're going to focus on tonight.
Yeah, I mean, Tulowitzki's obviously going to be your top play, but I think Peralta is, you know, right behind him, and I think for the price, especially in cash games, Peralta is the way you got to go.
Yeah, and Drew mentioned it. He gets a nice boost in the order tonight, batting 5th. So for his price point in Coors, I think you almost have to just, in most cases, just plug him in and move on and fill the other positions from there. Especially because shortstop tends to be a position that's just hard to get any good value get any good value out of that position anyways. So we'll just move on from shortstop then, go over to second base. Who's your top second base play tonight, Cardi?
It's actually probably going to be a little bit of a surprise, but it's Derek Dietrich. The park swing there is just enormous. Like, Marlins Park is so terrible, and Citizens Bank Park is so good. Even though I said Buchanan could maybe be a GPP play, he's not that good of a pitcher. Dietrich's batting second, so I think, everything lines up well for him. And second base is generally kind of a hard position to find, really elite production from anyway. So he's my top guy.
I have a feeling Drew's actually going to like that too.
Yeah, I have a lot of Dietrich. It's very frustrating that Draft Street hasn't had him for 2 days in a row now. Because second base as a whole is an abortion tonight. Like, the top guys in terms of our system with rankings are like Cano and Kinsler, but they're very expensive relative to where they rank in our system, so they're not really great value plays. And then there's Dietrich, and then like Zobrist is super cheap, so I don't mind Zobrist, and Tommy LaStella. And after that, Mark Ellis as a punt comes into play, just because he's in Coors and he has a platoon advantage.
Yeah, I wanted to mention LaStella too. I have him really high against Feldman in that park, so.
And then going back to shortstop real quick, we got a question on Hardy. Looks like he's, batting sixth tonight against Quintana. Do you like him at all, Drew?
I think he's an okay tournament play. I wouldn't use him in cash games, considering his price did bump up after he finally hit a home run on a few sites. Like, I know in FanDuel he went from 22 to 27. He's probably still low on DraftKings and Draft Street, but I would really try to find the extra room to carve out for Peralta, or on FanDuel Reyes, where Reyes isn't that much more expensive either.
Yeah, I like Hardy, but I think on a night where Peralta has a matchup like he does in cash games, I think you just put Peralta and move on. But on another night, Hardy'd be a guy that would be on my radar.
All right, we're all on the same page there, so let's just go on to outfield then. Top outfield, give me your top overall outfield play of the day, Derek, and then your top value option.
Okay. Top overall play is going to be Matt Holliday. I know people were talking yesterday about how he's been struggling, but the matchup's so good. I think he's better than people are crediting him for. So Holliday's my top guy today. In terms of value, I don't know. Value's tougher.
We'll get Dink's top play.
Yeah.
Our system agrees that it's Holliday, and then for value, it's really easy for me. It's Alan Craig. He's like way too cheap around the industry, and he hits left-handed pitching just as well as Holliday. He doesn't hit right-handed pitching as well, so he loses some value when the game gets into the bullpen relative to Holliday.
I forgot how cheap Craig was. Yeah, I'm totally about that too.
And it looks like who will if Colorado goes to the pen early, who will they be bringing in tonight, Drew? Do you know? It looks like they take out Franklin. Yeah,
it won't be Franklin, which sucks, because that would have been fun. It was almost fun last night, but he kind of worked around the middle part of the order. He gave up the bomb to Adams, which is weird, though. Yeah. But yeah, I have to pull up their usage charts, but it's not going to be Morales. It's probably going to be, man, their rotation has just been decimated. That I'm trying to remember who's still in the bullpen. It might be
Cannell's.
It might be that guy. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Damn it, Conley, K-A-H.
Canley. That's who I'm thinking too. Cannell.
Yeah,
I have no idea how to pronounce it.
Canley.
Yeah, he usually he gets a lot of run if a pitcher gets out early. So it'd be a righty. It looks like, which I guess brings up an interesting point where Matt Adams is really cheap. If you're playing in some GPPs, I know I've talked with some other guys about this. The fact that guys without platoon advantage, the platoon advantage against the starter, especially when you're talking lefty on lefty, they're obviously going to be completely under-owned. So if you have a good environment like Coors, you look at the bullpen, you see that it's most likely a righty's going to come in relief. A guy like Adams is going to get completely overlooked, and he could be a potential GPP option. You're obviously not going to want to run him out in cash games because a lot has to work in your favor to get into a position where he'll pay off his price tag. But if you're looking to get some Coors exposure but differentiate a little bit, I think Adams could be an option just because of who's likely to come in after De La Rosa gets out of the game.
Yeah, a guy like him is just tough because his platoon split is so big that
Yeah.
if De La Rosa goes even 5 or 6 innings, like he's gonna have a really hard time, doing that. So unless you're doing like a Cardinal stack, it's a tough play to make.
That's why for me, though, yeah, I agree if you view it as part of the stack. That's why for me, understanding how the site that you play on prices players is so important. Because like Draft Street price is based on splits. So you can get guys at a super discount when they are, same-handed matchups if you think that game is going to get to the bullpen early. Now, obviously, it carries a lot of risk, and it's probably better used for tournaments than cash games. But I think it's important to try to do those types of things on a site like Draft Street as opposed to a site like DraftKings that prices based on park. And so Adams is probably going to be a little bit more elevated because of what they're specifically pricing on.
And then obviously it's a little more risky, even though Draft Street incorporates the platoon split in their pricing. You're also going to get negative points for strikeouts, different things like that. So it is a little risky there, but like Derek said, it's more of if you're wanting to stack. That's a guy that would be probably commonly overlooked, especially on DraftKings. I'm not sure. Does Craig still have first base eligibility on DraftKings?
Does.
So if you're looking to, especially, you don't need it for the 300K punch out, but if there's a big tournament situation, like if this was just winner take all tonight, or first place gets the 100K tonight, there's going to be a lot of Cardinal stacks. Differentiate a little bit by going Adams over Craig. It's going to be a crappy sweat to watch, but it's certainly a viable option if you're looking to differentiate your stacks. With that said, let's go on to dongs. Derek?
Dongs, okay. Let me just mention a couple other outfield value plays that I like tonight. I think Ryan Rayburn is in a really good spot. And I think Inciarte against Masterson batting leadoff is in a pretty good spot. So there's that.
Well, it looks like we got the lineup out for Cleveland. Rayburn batting 8th, unfortunately.
Oh, maybe not then.
And Swisher's not even in the lineup. So we don't get. I know Drew kind of liked Swisher if he was in the right spot.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Yeah, it's because they're losing the DH, I think. So they have to bat Masterson. So Swisher's not getting the start. So you're not going to have him as an option tonight. We also have a question: Alex Rios or Alan Craig on Draft Street specifically, Drew?
I'd rather play Craig. I don't think Rios is a good play too, but we have Craig like way higher in our system.
I do too. So
okay. So we're in agreement on that. There was a question a little earlier that I missed too. Any love for Dozier at all tonight, Derek?
I think let me see. I had him. Yeah, he's kind of not for what he's going to cost you. I have him 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th today. So I mean, C.J. Wilson's a pretty tough opponent, even though he has the platoon advantage. The park's not that good, and it's not his home park. So I don't think Dozier's a guy you need to overextend yourself to get.
Do you agree with that, Dink?
Yeah, I think that idea is an interesting way to approach tournaments in terms of a low-owned guy against a good pitcher. But I think if you're going to do that, you want to do that against a guy who gives up power and gives up fly balls. And CJ keeps the ball on the ground a ton. And so, because you're already expecting it to be limited opportunities for the guy to really cash in. And so he's probably going to need to go deep. And so if I'm going to do that, I'd rather do it against a really good pitcher that does give up some fly balls. Wilson just gets a ton of ground balls.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I don't think you need to overextend and go Dozier. I know the ever-contrarian Nashville slugger, Ben Pritchett, likes Dozier tonight. But I'm definitely on your guys' side with that. But, Ben likes to get those plays ready. I was surprised I was giving him some crap for not writing up Jorge De La Rosa, even though he had the hitters article today. Because he just likes to he likes to be right on things that serve no point of logic. So
he likes the scout view as far as he loves to prove the stat head's wrong. Basically, like you said, he wants contrarian plays to go right, and he's always been that way. I mean, he was a top 5 Fantasy Pros MLB expert 2 years ago, because like you have to kind of go against the grain with some of that stuff, and he's definitely not afraid to do.
Oh,
that.
he prefers to go against the grain, for sure.
It's been that way for like forever, and if like you can learn like how to take some of his picks and like basically it's like a projection system where okay, well that's kind of ridiculous, but maybe this point is good.
Is that going to be the next iteration of Batman filtering Ben?
Yeah, it'll be Ben it'll be Ben edition. Sorry. DP corrected. He was top 3. So yeah, he's been like that ever since high school though. Like he would make these crazy picks like in our fantasy drafts and then just go on and on about how good they're going to be. And like he could have got him 2 or 3 rounds later. He just wanted to get him early so he could like specifically talk about how good of a play it was. It's maddening, but there is a method to the madness.
Yeah. Yeah, Dave has witnessed mine and Ben's conversations in chat at certain times throughout the year, where you try to talk. Like people labeled me as the contrarian last year, and then I come and start trying to talk logic with Ben, and it's not there. But anyways, moving on. Dongs of the night. I don't think we got ours yet. Derek, you got anything for me?
Yeah, I do.
Caleb Joseph.
It's close for me. It's either Cruz or Stanton, but I think I like Cruz better. And then under the radar, I don't know. Does Adam Dunn count as under the radar? I mean, he's got huge power, but I feel like he hasn't been talked about much today, and he's got a really good matchup.
Yeah, he's under the radar. That counts. I think anyone outside of Coors could be used as under the radar tonight. Dink, who's your guaranteed Don?
I'm going to say Jose Abreu. He's going to take Miguel Gonzalez deep. He has the highest home run score in our model tonight. Gonzalez tends to give up a little bit more power to right-handed bats with his changeup arsenal. And then under the radar, our system loves this guy, and Brad Ausmus hates him. Always hits him very low in the lineup. But I'll go Alex Avila.
Oh, Derek loves Alex Avila.
I know.
Our system has him
as like a top 20 hitter today. If you erase lineup positioning altogether, but they keep hitting him 8th, so it kind of sucks. But I think he takes Colby deep.
You gotta stack all those righties in a row. I mean that's the logical strategy when constructing a lineup. Before we go to the I'm going to regret this, I want to point out for those of you in chat still, feel free to give us some questions. We'll do a lightning round of questions if you give us enough to go through here. But then moving on, Derek, your I am going to regret this.
I'm going to regret mentioning David Buchanan at all.
I think we have to send out a mass email to our subscribers saying, hey, David Buchanan long shot. No, not going to happen. Drew, what are you going to regret?
I'm probably going to end up regretting playing Saltalamacchi over Rosario on Draft Street because I'll be feeling very good about it when like Rosario's 0 for 3 with a strikeout going into the 7th inning, and then a lefty will come in and he'll just hit one 600 feet and end my night. That's pretty much what always happens.
Pretty much. I want to rant about my beat last night. Well, it's not really a beat, but basically I'm on DraftKings and I rostered. It wasn't the smart price play, but I did roster Tulowitzki last night. So 9th inning, 8-0 game. They bring in Randy Choate for the 9th inning. So I'm sitting there, okay, there's no way Tulowitzki gets out against Choate. They let him record 2 outs, and then they bring in a freaking right-handed pitcher, Jason Mott, just to face Tulowitzki, up 8-0 in the 9th inning. They exhaust an arm just to get one single.
Like Tony La Russa passed that on to Matheny, and Matheny will like still play matchups up 8 runs in Coors with 2 outs in the 9th. It's ridiculous.
I was so pissed. I got so excited. I'm like, Oh, guaranteed single. It's not a big deal. I got this locked up. I ended up losing by a point on DraftKings.
Oh.
All I needed was a walk. He got the guy got a Peralta walk the inning before, and all I needed was to respond with a Tulowitzki walk against who I thought was going to be Randy Choate. But nope, didn't happen.
No Choate love.
No Choate love. Figured it was going there. Anyways, I think that's it. It doesn't look like we've got any more questions in the chat. So, Dave, feel free to wind us out here.
Yeah, I don't really know what wind us out means, but...
I don't know either. I just said it. It sounded cool.
I think it's like take us out and wind it up combined, I think is what wind us up means. So, yeah.
I had to have a Davis Maddock moment.
Yeah, that will do it for today's show. Thanks to Drew Dinkmeyer from RotoExperts.com, home of the Daily Fantasy Rundown. Also home of the guy who is going to be on the who has been on the Wall Street Journal. He was on the Daily Fantasy Sports panel. I mean, this guy kind of is everywhere. Can we say, is it okay to say who was at the FSTA?
I don't know where that's going to go, but it's okay. I mean, I think it's okay to say, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be featured in that or anything.
Okay, so basically, if you missed it, the Real World was at FSTA.
What?
Not the real world. Not the real world.
We don't know.
At FSTA.
We don't know. We don't know where Drew's going to be taking that, but he might
Real
be.
sports, David. Real sports.
The Real World was cooler.
Yeah,
That's my guilty pleasure. Thursday nights now. They moved it from Wednesday for some reason. But we got the Real World Road Rules, the challenge. It's my guilty pleasure.
I didn't even think about real sports and Real World, but
that's what we're making fun of you for.
No. I was just joking about the Real World.
Okay.
It was a joke. So.
Oh really?
Yes, but the HBO show Real Sports, is it Brant Gumbel or Greg Gumbel?
I don't know. I don't even have HBO.
Wow! I won't mention that to him. David Sematic definitely tried to get some FaceTime when they were in. So
with his tie-dye shirt and bucket hat on.
Yeah, we're on the plane. We were on the plane home. He's like, I can't believe that HBO guy hasn't contacted me yet. And I was like, I honestly am at a loss for words. So hopefully that will be good. But honestly, I couldn't think of someone who would be a better representative for daily fantasy sports than
Davis Maddock.
Than me making a cameo on that show. So yeah, good stuff. Thanks to Tuttle for filling in for hosting duties. I thought he did well. I mean, I thought he did really well. So maybe we can get Tuttle in some more hosting duties. Get Steve on the show. Steve has been wanting to get on the show, and if we can get some progress on the tools like we've made in the past 2 weeks, hopefully we can have that. Steve rants are the best, and yeah, we need to have them like during a Wednesday game where there are like games going on, and because you'll know when one of his players does something good. So that'll be fun. And also, we shouldn't leave out Derek Carty and his Batman projection system. Although we can't call it Batman, we're currently figuring out legal ways.
We're not going to get sued by Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
So hoping that doesn't happen. So that will do it.
You can't go Cartman either. So.
Oh, that would be sweet.
Yeah. Let's see if we can rock out to Davis Maddox's favorite song.
First things first, I'm the realest. Drop this and let the whole world feel it. Let 'em feel it. And I'm still
Davis is going to see Kershaw pitch tonight. So if Kershaw gets hit, that means Davis is not going to have a good time, because I guarantee you he was rostering random A's. Just because like they were playing that night.
That doesn't sound like Davis.
So yeah, he definitely likes to play on narrative street when he goes to the games.
Lightning bolt.
Later, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.